Okay. So we're going to switch out this media asset here. Let me turn that off. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for waiting. We had a little bit of tech issues on my side, but we got that clarified. Joel's been patiently waiting. So we're going to bring him in and we can start our live Q&A. So here comes Joel. Hi, Joel. Thanks for waiting for us here.
Hi. Yeah. I don't know whether it was your end or my end, but anyway, we're on now.
Yeah. All right. So let me start off things here with just kind of an intro. So today's live Q&A session, we're joined by Joel Salatin. If you don't already know who he is, Joel calls himself a Christian libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. Others who like him call him the most famous farmer in the world, the high priest of the pasture, and the most eclectic thinker from Virginia since Thomas Jefferson. Those who don't like him call him a bioterrorist, typhoid Mary, charlatan, and starvation advocate. Joel co-owns with his family Polyface Farm in Swoop, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Valley. The farm raises pastured livestock, including beef, pork, poultry, turkey, lamb, and rabbit, which is directly marketed in the region and shipped nationwide. He's also authored 16 books, including his most recent title, Homestead Tsunami, Good for Country, Critters, and Kids. Joel Salatin's a highly sought-after conference speaker and is the editor of the Stockman Grass Farmer. He also writes columns in numerous publications. Welcome, Joel, and thanks for joining me today in this live Q&A session.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. We usually kick things up with a startup story, but if listeners that are tuning in have gotten the chance already inside of our masterclass that we did together in December, we kind of went into some of that startup story. And just for time's sake, we'll hop right into some questions from audience members. So let's start. All right. So the first one I have here is actually from a community member named Tracy. She asked, how did you start your apprenticeship and steward programs at the very beginning? How did you advertise it and vet the applicants, etc.?
Okay. All right. What a great question. So what was happening as we were going along, we started getting some young people from time to time would ask us, can I come and learn? And we felt like we didn't have enough work. We didn't want to complicate our lives. It just didn't seem a good fit. And so we basically said no for a couple of years. And then one of our customers, for the sake of brevity here, one of our customers is a quintessential entrepreneur. And he came to us and said, how soon can you produce 600 dozen eggs a week for me? And he had developed a market kind of independently on his own just because he loved us. And when can you get 600 dozen eggs? And we said, well, that's kind of a big deal, 100 dozen a day. But we suddenly saw that as okay, this would give us work for, somebody else to do, give us an expansion opportunity. And it's not nearly a full-time gig. And so it would give time for somebody to do that enterprise plus, other things and learn the other thing. So that year, it's been 28 years ago or so, we launched, we got 1,000 pullets and raised them up to start this 600 dozen egg a week gig. And we put in the apprentice cottage and we just picked, a couple people who had contacted us, that we had said no to, and said, hey, we're open for business now. If you want to come. And so we had the first one say yes and came, and we planned for just one, and then just a couple months into it, we had another friend that was interested, and so added a second one. And then we had two for many years. So we did the apprenticeship program. It was a one year program for several years. And we began realizing that the summer was the, the crunch time and the real learning time. And by that time we were having more and more people ask, can I come? And we can only accommodate two per year. And so we decided then about 10 years later to add the summer stewardship program, which we now take 11, May 1 to September 30. And so now the apprentice program has moved to kind of a grad school. If you do the stewardship program, which is like boot camp, and you want to stay on another year, then you can put your name in the hat to be on for another year. We take 2 to 4 apprentices who go October 15 to October 15 after their stewardship. And the stewards are here for 5 months, May 1 to September 30. The mission statement for the steward program is very simple. Come for a season and learn if you have what it takes to be a farmer. The mission statement for the apprentice program is completely different. Add a year, learn the polyface way, and be able to duplicate it anywhere in the world. So those are 2 very, very different mission statements. We view them very differently. So everything is it has evolved to this point. And I think people don't appreciate how much time and effort we put into the stewardship program. I mean, because we've got 11 people coming from all over the country. Suddenly you throw them into this very intimate setting, and they live together, they work together, they sleep. We have girls and boys cottages, but basically, they're thrown in here together. 11 of them, different ages, everywhere from 18, never been away from home, all the way to, a 50-year-old married with kids, so it's quite a melting pot, but that's how we started it back in the beginning.
Yeah, and have you seen a lot of farm plants come from that experience? It sounds like there's kind of 2 different levels. One is dip your toe in the water with farming. The other one's try to create a carbon copy of what we're doing.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or at least have enough principles to be able to adapt wherever you end up.
Yeah.
And so yes, we do have numerous young people that have germinated, no money, no land, and they're now full-time farming. And in fact, next summer, if things hold together, Lord willing, we will have our next Stockman grass farmer gathering here. We do it every other year. And next year, we're looking at featuring 8 of our primo grads who will tell their story of young person, no land, no money, and now full-time farming, and how they developed to that point. The stories are very different kinds of farms, different places in the country, but just fascinating. And we think that it can be a real catalyst for young people. How do you do this? How do you make this happen? And we're hoping to really encourage a lot of young people to think about how they can proceed.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I know that it just takes, them hooking on to one limiting belief, and then all of a sudden there's lots of reasons why we can't do it. But yeah, if you have someone starting from those places and hearing those stories, it just speaks volumes. So very cool. All right, we'll hop into the next question here. So this also comes from Tracy. She asked, how did you start your farm store without registering with the state? I know that you are not big on registering if you don't have to, but what about zoning and everything now that you are no longer a small business?
Okay. So,
yeah, you can speak to that at all.
Yeah. So in our county, there are nuances to this question. So let me say straight up front that when we began selling, when we started Polyface Inc., we registered for the sake of collecting sales tax, because you have to collect sales tax on retail sales in Virginia. I don't think that's what she's asking. She's asking about the physical store on the farm and what we went through the hoops to do that. So in our county, so 2 things. In our county, fortunately, I mean, we have zoning, but you don't have to get a building permit for a farm building. And that includes a farm shop. Now, when they wrote those regulations, they were saying a farm shop. They were thinking farm shop like welders and acetylene torches and table saws. But our position is, well, what more represents a farm shop than where people come to shop? That's more a farm shop than a welder. And so we built the structure without any permit whatsoever. Then the second part is the business license. And in our county, a farmer who is selling on site doesn't need a business license to sell their product on site unless and until they start selling $100,000 worth of product that they don't raise themselves. And so if you collaborate with a neighbor, for example, to sell, their pumpkins or, something that they have done, something that's not yours, once that goes over 100,000, then you have to have a business license, which is basically a very light, it's not big, it's a light tax on every dollar, beyond 100,000 that comes through. This year, we hit that amount. So this year, for the first time, looks like we're going to be paying, some business tax. But, we're grateful for the sales, and that's a small price to pay to be able to do that. So our county was conducive to that kind of arrangement. And we haven't had any trouble at all. Now, if you actually register as a retail establishment, that was an option as well. And that suddenly throws you into a commercial entrance, so you have to have sight distance at your entrance. Then you have to have handicap parking. You have to have, handicap toilet access. We do have all that, but it has to be, licensed, compliant. And so we are very handicap friendly. We have handicap, toilet, whatever, but it's not licensed. We haven't asked anybody for their approval. And so I hope that answers her question, where we are.
Yeah, great. And then I couldn't help but sneak my own question in here. So this one's kind of a big picture question, but so for me personally, in the past 5 months, I lost my father to lung cancer. This month, I lost my grandfather. He actually had 2 different types of cancers at the same time: melanoma in his brain, and then non-Hodgkin's lymphoma tumors in his back and pelvis. Right. So not only that story of those 2 loved ones that have passed, but also several other loved ones that have also had cancer diagnoses in the past 5-10 years in my little corner of the world. But this seems to be a macro problem in the country too, with growing rates of cancer throughout the country. According to the National Institute of Health, nearly 40.5% of Americans will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives. And cancer has become one of the top 2 leading causes of death in the United States for over the past 75 years. So my question stems from that. It typically, the medical world says it's genetics and lifestyle. I don't think my family tree genetics have swung that much in the past 2-3 generations that we can necessarily blame that so much as maybe lifestyle. And when it comes to that, how important is food when it comes to human health, and why should it matter to the consumer?
Yeah, well, I mean, food isn't everything, but it's probably a good starting point. And, the average American is more interested in the purity of the gas in their car than they are the food that enters their body. And true, we have a plethora of chemicals that we're immersed in now, especially farmers. Pesticides, herbicides, chemical fertilizers, insecticides. We live in this bath of stuff, and so of course farmers show high rates of this. If you look at the data, farmers show an inordinately high level of it, but then a lot of it comes through our food as well. And so we don't use any of it. None of it's on our food, and I can assure you that the Maha movement has generated an additional interest and just level of interest in this whole wellness question, which, again, food isn't everything, but it is certainly a starting point. And if you don't start there, you can only end up so far.
Sure. Yeah. And Sarah asks, this kind of totally different topic here, but same kind of arena. She asks, can you explain the rotational grazing method you employ and its benefits to the ecosystem?
Oh my. Well, we won't get to any other question. Now let me condense it as fast as I can.
Sure.
So the way I like to start this is to explain grass grows in a sigmoid curve, an S curve. It means it starts slow. Think about the bottom of the S. It starts slow and then it speeds up real fast, and then it goes into senescence out the crown of the S. And so in a continuous graze program where the cows are not moved from spot to spot, the cows are basically grazing the grass off every time it comes to that first inflection point, heading up into that fast growth cycle, what I call the juvenile or teenage growth cycle. And so obviously you'll get a lot more grass, a lot more forage if you never prune it until after it's gone through that blaze of growth. Now, and gets to that second inflection point. And of course, if you don't harvest it there, then it turns into brown and goes into senescence, and I call that nursing home grass. Okay, so the point is that the whole idea of rotational grazing is to control the pruning. You can call it grazing if you want, but I like to call it pruning because grazing has fallen out of favor with the greenies who think that burps and farts are going to kill us all. So I call it pruning, which has very positive connotations. If you control the pruning so that it's always at that second inflection point, you can easily graze. You can easily produce 2 or 3 or more times forage on the same ground. Excuse me, because it's I've been out with a chainsaw, got some sawdust up my nose. Because the amount of forage grown in time, obviously, as that line steepens, you get a lot more forage per growth. So we may only have the cows on a particular spot, a given spot, maybe 5 days in a year. That's it. So there's this long rest period in between, and the grass gets to grow up to that second inflection point. And by doing that, right now our county average cow days per acre, which is what one cow will eat in a day, our county average is 80 cow days per acre. In other words, an acre will support 80 cows for 1 day a year, or 1 cow for 80 days a year. All right, and on our farm we average 400 cow days per acre. We've never bought a bag of chemical fertilizer, and we haven't planted a seed in 65 years. So, I'm not bragging. I'm simply paying humble homage to a system that is marvelously functional if we can just tap into it to make it work.
Wow. Those are amazing numbers. All right, then we'll get into Tracy's question. Hello, Joel. I watched a video of you the other day on YouTube. You were teaching the crowd how to process meat birds. You had a setup with the rotating scalder, plucker, poultry station, etc. Could you please tell me where I can buy this setup? By the way, the video was amazing. Easiest way I've seen bird processing ever in my life.
Yeah, good. Good. Well, that's very cool. So there are numerous marketers around the country that sell small scale, this kind of a little bigger than Homestead, but smaller than industrial, little processing equipment. Featherman is one of the big names. The Eli Rife, the Rife poultry processing equipment is another very, very good one. I do not recommend Yardman. I think it's cheap and just way underperforming. It underpowered. Everything, both the scalder, the picker, everything is very underpowered. So I don't recommend that. But there are these others around, and the prices come way down. When we started back many, many years ago, there were only 2 manufacturers in the nation, and they were very expensive. And now that so many people are doing this, that whole industry has really been able to take off, and it's been exciting to see the prices come down. If you're just going to process 5 or 10 birds, you probably do it by hand. But as soon as you get up into 20 or 30, you're going to want one of these little automatic feather pickers. It changes your life.
All right, great. And then Grayson asks, what's the worst day you've ever had on the farm?
Worst day. Probably the worst day I've ever had on the farm was the day I cut a tree, and it hit a stump that was out about 10 feet that I didn't notice, and the butt of the tree, and it became a teeter-totter. The butt of the tree kicked up and knocked out 2 of my teeth, and gave me a concussion. And I came to, was able to drive home, and went to the ER, and then of course had to go get some dental surgery and work. And that was a pretty rough day.
Oh, that explains it. Yeah.
Probably that's from a physical, like an injury standpoint. Okay?
Sure.
And we farmers, we've always got some injuries. That was probably the worst injury day. The worst kind of whatever emotional day was the day that the food police showed up at our house with their big bronze badge and put a police tape on all of our beef hanging at the custom slaughterhouse, and told us they were going to confiscate everything, and our poultry processing was illegal, and we had to cease and desist. And we had all that great big showdown. That was probably the worst, from an emotional, big picture standpoint. I mean, injuries are injuries, but having your farm closed down, that's another story.
Ooh. Yeah. How long did it take for the dust to settle on that? I know it's.
The crisis was a week. That was a week till they we got our politicians, our elected officials involved, and they backed off. And then we had to deal with, they backed off, but we wanted them to actually to be at least emotionally, if not legally, prohibited from coming back and doing it again. And so we actually pushed it farther, and it actually went another, month or 2 till we actually got closure from the inspectors, from the bureaucrats, that we would be. We had a letter then finally that we were okay, and they wouldn't harass us anymore. So it was a several month process, but it was definitely worth it to not just have them if they just retreat with no kind of final ruling, then every day you want, well, they're going to come back, what are they going to do? So we didn't want that. So once we had our big showdown, we pursued it from our end until we got written concession from them that we were okay. And that was a pretty big deal.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. All right. And then Genevieve asks, what's your best argument for why pasture-raised meat is worth the extra cost?
Okay. Well, there's several reasons. One is, of course, in our situation, we don't use any medications or drugs. The poultry industry uses a tremendous amount of antibiotics. There's hormones, different things that they use. And so, it's a nice thing to be able to ask your customers, who's drugging your dinner. We're not drugging your dinner. Okay. And a lot of people don't realize that 80% of all of the pharmaceuticals used in the United States do not go through humans. I mean, think of how many pharmaceuticals humans use. Well, it's not even half of what's used in livestock.
Wow.
So that so the pasture grass-based system allows us to build immunity because there's a lot of natural antibiotics in fresh grass, and the chickens don't eat a lot of it, but it's kind of like a supplement, like a vitamin pill, for them, like a tonic, and they don't need to eat a lot, just a few blades of clover a day, and they get a tremendous amount of supplemental, of supplemental strength. So there's one. But the second reason is that it fundamentally changes the omega-6, omega-3 fatty acid profile to something that's more historically accurate. One of the problems in America today, I mean, if you start going down any food nutrition rabbit holes, you're going to see omega-6, omega-6, omega-6. That's what's in all the the seed oils and the the PUFAs, the polyunsaturated fatty acids. I mean, these are all linked together. And so the antidote for all that is green material. So your greens, and dietary greens, so eat some, some spinach, some kale, some Swiss chard, and that's where you get your high omega-3s. And you need omega-6, but you want the ratio to be right. And this is involved especially with inflammation. So if and this is where crackers and chips and breakfast cereal, these are now staples in the American diet, and all of them have a very, very unnatural omega-6/3 ratio, way too high in 6, not enough in 3. And so there are very much empirical. There's empirical nutritional information that you can use. One of the most fun things that ever happened to us. We had a customer that was the dietitian at the local hospital, and she started getting our chickens, and she used her lab at the hospital to run some tests. She got chickens from the store and ours, and ran tests on, for example, this kind of thing on the fat profile, and she was so amazed at the differences that she saw. She started actually prescribing our chicken to heart attack patients when they got dismissed from the hospital, and she worked with them to to help change their menu and everything. She prescribed our chickens for them just because of what she saw in her lab. And so all you have to do is cook two side by side, and it'll make all the difference in the world. And finally, I'll just say this, about 15 to 20% faster than what's in the store. And so if you take two crock pots, identical crock pots, and get raise a chicken from yours, and then get one from the store, put them in exactly the same time, cook them the same weight, same everything. In a few hours, the pastured chicken will just be a heap of broth and bones and just disintegrated. The one from the store looks like a plastic chicken. And it's because they secrete adrenaline all the time. That's the only thing we can figure, that they're stressed, and so they're secreting adrenaline all the time, making everything tough, as opposed to your pastured chickens, which are stress-free, and they're much more tender that way. So you can taste it, you can feel it, you can see it, and you can measure it nutritionally. There's a whole lot of reasons why the pastured poultry is the superior option.
Yeah, well explained. I remember going to college 20 years ago now, but I always thought that food was always just calories in, calories out. Good food had high calories, bad food, low calories, or even negative calories, like celery, right? So it wasn't until I took an advanced nutrition class I realized, there's all these properties and repercussions of these foods, that healthy foods actually have healing and cancer fighting, inflammatory fighting properties, and bad food the opposite, bad properties. Yes. So I remember just being eye-opening. That was 20 years ago, and now it's becoming more mainstream, which is great to see. But Yeah, I think you summarized that really well. Let's move on to Charlotte here. Charlotte asks, what inspired you to write Homestead Tsunami? What key messages do you hope readers take away?
Key messages from Homestead Tsunami.
Yeah, what inspired you to write it?
Oh,
And what, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. I missed the first part there.
Sure.
Yeah. So I had written Polyface Micro the year or two before, because I suddenly, I mean, this was back, pre-COVID, but man, the homestead movement, John, has just exploded, as you know. I mean, there's a homestead conference, fair, expo going on almost every weekend in the country. I mean, it's just crazy. And of course, I go to a bunch of them, but I can't even get to them all anymore. I mean, they're just over and way too many. So, so as I began spending more and more time, I mean, historically, my ministry, my mission, my bread and butter was commercial farmers. I wanted people to have a pathway to full-time farming. But I'm very aware that a lot of people start small. Maybe they start with a homestead, or they start with a hobby farm or something, and then it gradually moves into something else. Well, as the homestead movement grew, I was suddenly back. I can think back, 30 years ago when I began, traveling and speaking. I'd get done and people would say, "Oh, that's cute, but how does it scale up?" Well, then here, 5 or 6 years ago, it seemed like every time I got done speaking, it was always, "Oh, that's unbelievable, but how does it scale down? I've only got 5 acres, 10 acres, 15 acres." And so I did Polyface Micro to, to scale everything down to the homestead level. And then over the next year, I just realized that a lot of people had run to this and or a lot of people were looking at it, kicking the tires, but they were getting a lot of pushback from family and friends. What? Move away from Papa John's delivery? How can you live, without door-to-door, pizza delivery? Or live in the country? What's there to do? You can't, there's no recreation, entertainment. And then what happened was there were more and more people who I met who were discouraged. They started this, they came out, they bought this piece of property or whatever, and they got onto the land. And 2 years in, suddenly all their dreams and fantasies, the cow had mastitis, the cucumbers had, cucumber worm, the tomatoes had, tomato blight, and the fox ate the chickens, and, they're discouraged. And so I realized that while I am a very practical person, and people wanted that hardcore how-to practical stuff, there was a time that they needed a why. They needed a why to take them through those rough days, to take them through that rough time. And so that's why I wrote Homestead Tsunami, for 3 groups of people. One is the person who's on the fence. Should we make this change? Should we leave the city and go to the country? That's the first one. The second one are to their friends who are discouraging them from making the leap. "Oh, you're nuts. You're crazy." And the third group are the people that are 2 years in, 3 years in, and they're discouraged, and they need to rediscover their why. And so it was for those 3 groups of people that I wrote Homestead Tsunami.
Wow. Very cool. All right, and then we'll move on to Sarah's question. How do you find regenerative crop farmers to grow feed for you? No good mills near me. I spend a lot on shipping quality feed. And then second to that, Jennifer asks, would you mind sharing the feed you use for meat chickens? Kind of a double-pronged question. Let me know if you need me to read those again.
Sure. No, I'm good.
Okay.
So this is I've kind of got to, this is a hard question for me. because I want people to start. Excuse me. I'm an incrementalist, and you don't always get. Excuse me, I got that sawdust down my throat. You don't always get the full loaf the first time. You have to start where you are. And I know that nobody out there, or well, a lot of people out there just think it would be awful to buy GMO chicken feed from the store and use it for your chickens. But if that's all you have, the fact that those chickens are running around on grass is chlorophyll is nature's #1 detoxicant. That's why they sell chlorophyll at General Nutrition. You get these little pills, chlorophyll, and it's like a rotor-rooter. It helps to it glums on to toxins in your body and you expel them. And so chlorophyll is like that. So where I'm going with this is, while I don't want to use chemicals and I don't want to use that kind of feed. If it's either that or nothing, you do the best you can do. And so then you have the question, well, do I use that and trust the grass? That's why I'm such a big believer in the movement and the grass. And I see a lot, John, of pastured poultry operations that are not taking care of their grass. They're leaving them too long in a place. They got dirt, or the grass is too long. The chickens can't eat it. There are a lot of issues, and so focus on the grass first, and make sure that grass is palatable, tender, succulent for those chickens, because chickens aren't herbivores, and so they are not naturally, they don't naturally eat a lot of grass. Again, they eat it like a supplement, like a tonic, and it's not their mainstay. But it's like salad for a human. You're not gonna live on. At least I can't live on salad. I got to have some meat and potatoes and stuff like that. But so some greens along are extremely valuable. Now, then you have to answer the question, well, what's my business plan, or am I going to spend 60 cents a pound for GMO free, bagged, shipped in from 500 miles away because we don't have a local supplier? Or am I going to buy the 26 cents a pound feed down at the feed store, let my money turn around in the local community, maybe run into some farmers down there, we start some relationships. We can be friends, invite somebody over for dinner. Hey, and you build this kind of local network. So let me tell you my story, because I think it's germane here. So back in the day when we started pastured poultry, there were no GMOs, and we were buying regular feed from we never went organic. We didn't. It was just pastured poultry. But it was so much better than the organic chickens that were raised in factory farms, that there was no comparison. And realize that today 95% of all organic certified chickens are raised in factory houses, and they never see a blade of grass. They don't see sunshine. Even if they have pop holes to go out, they don't go out because it's too unhandy. All right. So anyway, so GMOs came in, and that was just too far for me. All right, I don't want GMOs. So I went to my mill, and we had about three mills in the area, mostly doing dairy feeds, because the poultry industry did their own feeds. That was all in house. The vertical integrators, they don't sell feed. So I said I don't want this GMO. Well, the guy laughed at me. It's all the same. It doesn't matter. So I went around and started looking for somebody that had a mill that could get this. And so we had some friendships with a Mennonite family about how far? They're about 17 miles away. And they had an old cobweb 1940, 50 hammer mill that was on mothballed, in one of their sheds. And I said, would you guys be willing to find and mill, GMO free grain for me? Well, it turned out that I got in the middle of a family argument because, grandpa had built the shed and put the mill in and all this. Now grandson, you got son and you got grandson, and the grandson wants to tear the mill down, use the concrete slab for something, for something else, and not have all that, useless space with that old, mothballed spider web little mill in there. And so when the grandson, when I went and made this request, the grandson was all over it. Man, I would love to, get some use out of that old mill and, and crank it up and actually have it do something instead of just sitting there taking up space. And so they found a couple farmers in the area doing GMO free. We got them a ration, and they milled it and made it for us. And we went over there, and we'd go over there with our little grainovator, 4-ton grainovator buggy pulled behind the pickup, and we'd pick it up. And this went on for, I don't know, about a year. And they started realizing, well, this is a potential enterprise for us. And GMOs, they came on more, people got more concerned, and they started milling for other people. And about a year in, we were tired of running over there all the time. And I went to them and I asked them, would you guys be interested in a bulk truck? I mean, have you thought about a bulk truck so you could make deliveries? Oh, they said, we think about it every day. That's our weak link right now. We could go full time with this if we just had a bulk truck. And I said, I'll tell you what, if I loaned you an interest-free loan, and listen, and anybody that thinks that I'm acting like a rich man, we were not. We were just, we don't have Swiss bank accounts. We were hardscrabble, but the Lord had blessed us. We had some money in the bank. We were doing okay. And we were losing. I was losing Daniel, our son. I was losing him a day a week running over there getting feed. And it was high risk, 4 tons of feed on a bumper hitch of a pickup truck. You can't go over about 45 or it starts to weave, and you can't stop very well because you don't have, these things aren't made, these grainovator buggies, they're made to stay on a farm pulled by a tractor and go out, and feed a pig feeder or chicken feeder or something. So we were pushing everything to its, highest risk limits. In addition to losing a day of work on a week on the farm. And so I said, I'll tell you what. So, don't think that this was all just altruistic. This was enlightened capitalism. And so I went to them. I said, if I loaned you the money, interest-free, did a 5-year interest-free loan for you to get a bulk truck, would you go for it? They said, oh, so within a week, they found a bulk truck in North Carolina, bought it. I paid for it. And suddenly we got bulk deliveries, and that little mill now, 20 years later, employs like 3 or 4 full-time people. They are the go-to GMO-free mill for the entire 200-mile radius of the Mid-Atlantic region. They've got two bulk trucks, triple axle. They can take 22 tons at a time. They've just done fantastic. And so that's the other side of the story. The first side is do what you got to do, be incremental, and don't feel like you've got to be 100% day one. That's the first thing. Start, okay? But the other part is build your relationships, build your networks locally, and invest in those kinds of relationships, and you'd be surprised what you can build that you can't even see or envision today, but what can come if you just start. The key is to start, and then you can refine. You can refine forever. We're still refining. You can refine forever, but you have to start.
Yeah, it reminds you of the saying, your network is directly correlated to your net worth, so it's almost like your network as a farmer is directly related to your farm's ability to become profitable and provide quality veggies and feed to your cattle. And yeah, it's just in every area of business, networking and you being able to create this mill now that's providing local non-GMO food. It's just so cool. It's such a great story. I hope that's really inspiring. I think, yeah, hit the ground running, see what you can dig up in your local community and invest in your local network. We probably have time for one more question here. Looks like it'll come from Claire. She asks, what do you use for grass/cover crops?
Oh, well, we don't grow any annuals, so we don't do any tillage. We don't grow any crops, and so we don't need cover crops because we've always got grass. I mean, whether it's dormant in the winter or whatever, but our sod is we never break our sod. So cover crops, I think, are they're just not an issue for us.
Okay. And you've never had to supplement it to bring it to life or things like that in the early phases that you can
No,
remember?
we've never, we've never. Now, if we do a conversion, and on rental ground, sometimes we'll go, we might rent a property that's got, a 10-acre cornfield, on a corner of it or something. And so, where, sometimes we do some conversion here, maybe some woods that we're converting to pasture. And when we do that, we simply take a cyclone seeder and spin on a cocktail, a couple clovers, some rye to act as a nurse crop, and then, 3 or 4 grasses, Timothy, bluegrass, and then we drag we'll cut a treetop and just drag it over to kind of disturb that ground, and kind of get some, seed to soil contact, and it comes on and we're good to go. So we're very bootstrap poor boy when it comes to that kind of thing.
Very cool. All right. Well, we thank you for taking the time. I know it's been almost an hour now. So, and if anyone else wants to continue this conversation and learn more from Joel, go and check out our free masterclass. And he and I spoke in December, and we talked about how he transitioned his homestead into a 4 million plus per year farm. So be sure to go check that out. It's free to get in there and free to access. Thanks again, Joel, for taking the time.
Thank you, John.
So long.
So long. Take care.